Okay, welcome to HRT or Not month. I'm chatting with Claire Snowdon-Darling. Claire, do you want to tell us who you are and what you do? And then we'll get on to the topic.
I'd love to. So I'm Claire Snowdon-Darling. I am the head of the College of Functional Wellness, and I also have a clinic. I've been in clinical practice for 17 years, and I specialise in menopause, hormones, and other things that are related but often don't sound related, like digestion. And my journey to specializing in menopause is I was kind of like I'm a kinesiologist and nutritionist, and I was a little bit like a kind of a general practitioner. I used to sort of work with everything and anything that kind of presented. And then I went through early menopause at 38 and realized that despite doing everything that I'd been told to do in my therapy and in other therapies, I still wasn't feeling any better. And so it led me on a big path of research, along with my fabulous business partner. And we ended up creating an original clinic model, which has now developed into menopause coaching training. So sort of by going through my own process, we realized the gap that was in research and how we can fill it, really. So that's a bit about me.
Awesome. I think so many of us who come into the menopause space go, oh, what I need isn't there.
Oh,
I'll
yeah,
create
exactly.
it.
Exactly.
So, right, HRT or not, it's a biggie, but we're going to
Yeah,
try and keep. I know I'm bad for this, but we're going to try and keep on point
sure.
and just
Yeah.
on message.
Okay.
So, where do we start?
So people often ask me, HRT, loads of risks associated. And I go, yep. And there are risks associated with not being on HRT. Either way, there's risks. So my argument to people is always, if you are life affected by your menopause and you're struggling and you have some notion that I'm supposed to be able to get through this naturally, but you're not able to function at all and you're not getting out of bed, then maybe that it would be a good opportunity to explore something that could help you. The issue is that I think with HRT is there are a lot of options, and women don't know about all the options because the options that are presented by GPs tend to be quite limited and based on what the GPs had training on. And a lot of the options that are available to women and can be helpful to women aren't regulated by the NHS. So women are actively discouraged from doing those things. So then women end up very often very confused and then still in this state of fear of, well, I can't have something that's unregulated, but what the doctor could offer me, but I didn't know about this other thing. And well, my mum went through it naturally, so I should be going through it naturally. And I think we can get ourselves into quite a pickle.
And I agree. And I think the whole this whole notion of I should be going through it naturally is one that I just want to banish, and it really annoys me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know you understand why. But also I just think it means that we often, when we're in that place of feeling utterly, overwhelmed by everything, however much people say, well, if you just improve your diet or if you just do this, that, and the other, it feels too big, doesn't it? And so
Yeah.
HRT for a lot of people can be that really useful sort of stepping stone to feeling a bit
Yeah,
better, so that they can make other changes as well.
absolutely. And one of the other things that I see quite a lot in my clinic are women who've gone down the HRT route. Now, maybe it's more of the synthetic HRT, which we can have a little chat about. And so their bodies, they're just not getting on with it. Or they're actually on the right kind of HRT, or, the more that there are body identical, aren't they? We're going to go into that in a moment, park that for a moment. But they're on the ones that actually you go, oh, yeah, no, you're on the good stuff, but they're still feeling awful. And my experience is that often women who are struggling through menopause often had sort of red flag precursors in their health history. So they were either very stressed, they maybe had a history of like long-standing irritable bowel syndrome or bad periods their whole life, really struggled, migraines, headaches, lots of these kind of lower level symptoms that had caused them bother in the past. But actually, once you start trying to put hormones on top of that, they're not able to absorb them because they've got issues in their gut. They've just got this kind of they've got an environment that then even the HRT, it's just not going to be the magic bullet. So actually, yeah, I understand that. Well, let's get your diet sorted and those things, but it can't be that in isolation. You've got to actually then be, you know, maybe putting in the hormones to actually to help feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite a big jigsaw, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It is. We like to talk about the foundations, which is getting the diet right, diet and rest. And of course, if you're not sleeping, that's not a fun one. And also, women are often piling on weight, so then they're kind of going, "Oh, well, I've got to go to the gym and I've got to go on a run," and you know, you're trying to flog a dead horse. So getting the basics in place, which is yes, eating in a way that is going to be helping your gut microbiome. I think this is the other thing, you know, just gonna sort of like it's just clicked for a lot of women. You know, there's such a diet culture in society. And so when someone says, well, we need to get your diet right, it's like, oh, here I am being told I've got to do something in my diet again. And I'm exhausted and I'm feeling really just under the weather. I can't even think about that. What I always try and do with my clients is go, okay, this is why we're going to work on your diet so that when you take the HRT, you can actually absorb it through your gut lining. And if you are a person, I'm one of them, who actually has such a history of gut dysbiosis that you can't take it, we've got to look for alternatives. But we're not going to know that. And those alternatives are expensive and unregulated. And so we're not going to know that until we have cleaned up your diet or changed your diet and got rid of food intolerances and blood sugar balancing and all those things. So let's work on that now. And then we'll know, can we actually get something from your GP? Can you even maybe do it naturally if you want to? Or is there a different path you're going to have to follow? Rather than just it being, oh, well, I'm supposed to be working on my diet. And it feels like this never ending kind of, you know, mountain that we're climbing.
And I think because a lot of us have a history of kind of disordered eating in some capacity, you know,
Yes.
we've tasted the latest yo-yo diet for years. The idea of working on your diet can feel like it's just going to be yet another round of restriction and getting back into that mindset of being good and bad and stuff like that, which obviously is
Yes.
not what you're talking about at all. What we're
Yeah.
talking about here is what can you add in, what can you focus on that's going to make you feel better.
Yeah. And I think especially when women are, I like to call it the occult weight gain, because it's like it literally just, it's like magic. It just comes out of nowhere. And I think a lot of women, and I certainly had this experience, just start to get really scared of food and eating and enjoying themselves, because it's like, I am so scared that tomorrow I'm going to be half a stone heavier. I just don't know what to do. And so yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, it's completely about empowering women to understand what's actually happening in their body, not demonizing food, but at least they can make informed choices, knowing, because they actually understand what's going on. That's the real key.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's say in our little ideal world, we've now sorted out our stress. We're now eating in a way that's supporting our gut. Right, what do we need from the hormones?
Yeah, great. So the bit that always confuses me, and I like to I sort of think sometimes I just ask all the really like the basic questions that no one else asks. I kind of go, but why? I was that really annoying kid. And the bit that always really confuses me about the medical model, and I'm not, and you know, thank you doctors for all that you do, but I just feel that the way that they look at menopause is very, very myopic, and women are suffering on the back of it. So when you look at what happens in perimenopause, the first thing that happens, so throughout our life, we've got our estrogen and our progesterone, and they track along, they're supposed to track along quite nicely. If you've had that history, though, of gut dysbiosis or period problems, they're not. And that's actually an interesting thing that can start to really show itself up in perimenopause. But what's supposed to happen is estrogen and progesterone tracking along nicely, progesterone then falls off the cliff. Like literally, if you look at it on a graph, it falls off the cliff. But estrogen carries on. Now, our issues, a lot of the symptoms come because of this drop off in progesterone, which we call estrogen dominance. It's a misnomer. It's progesterone deficiency. It's like dropped off a cliff. Estrogen carries on for quite some time. It actually only starts to go a little bit crazy when our periods go crazy. And for some women, that's not for years and years and years. So this bit could be happening mid to late 30s.
Yeah.
Definitely in our early 40s, but our periods aren't destabilizing until maybe late 40s even. So the bit that I'm always confused about is a woman goes to the GP often because she's in overwhelm, like just, putting on weight, often still has bleeds that are fine, or a bit of spotting, also a sign of, at that stage, of progesterone deficiency. Maybe not even at the hot sweat stage, but just teary, all of those kind of things. Yeah, okay, you're over 45. We're not going to do a blood test. We're going to stick you on HRT. Great, that sounds great. And even if they've got the ones that are less associated with risk, great. But the problem is the GPs actually give progesterone, fabulous, and estrogen. Now, we're in a place where we're supposed to be building up the progesterone. So what I find interesting is when you speak to some specialists who go, yeah, that doesn't make sense to us either. And we like to prescribe a course of progesterone by itself to begin with to rebalance the deficiency before we add in estrogen. The GPs don't sign off on that, so that's an issue in the medical model that we're dealing with. But this is why a lot of women will go on to HRT and go, I feel worse. Well, yeah, because you still had the right amount of estrogen, and now you've been given progesterone and estrogen.
And the basic model in the medical world, as we're seeing it at the moment, is that it's using HRT for something when you've reached menopause, isn't it? But actually, a lot of us are needing something way sooner as we're in really early perimenopause. And for the people for whom those early perimenopause symptoms are not the obvious things, they're nothing heat related, they're nothing like that, but they're anxiety, crazy levels of anxiety, insomnia, all those things.
Itching scalp, that's a fun one.
Yeah, and all the ones that people kind of don't necessarily join the dots to think are anything to do with menopause, because there's still, and I know I'm preaching to the converted in saying this to you, but I'm saying this for the benefit of people watching, obviously, there's still this perception that the whole menopause transition is kind of one set thing, when actually there are, as you say, there are these different stages. There's the progesterone deficiency before we even start looking at estrogen coming into the picture, isn't there?
Absolutely. And so I personally was working with a specialist who understood that what I needed to begin with was progesterone before we even started looking at estrogen. So giving my body this opportunity to build up the progesterone, and then and I often say this to my clients, you'll know when you're ready for estrogen, because it's different symptoms. They're hot flushes, but they're different hot flushes. They're the very slow, protracted ones, not the quick, rushy ones. The vaginal dryness, but they tend to be much, much later in menopause. The mood changes are different as well. It's like, I've always sort of described it that lack of progesterone is I'm just really teary and a mood swingy. Lack of estrogen is there's just no color in the world. It's a very different feeling. And lack of testosterone is I can't even bother to get out of bed. So it's a very different feeling, and to give it all in one go, I don't really understand that. So that's personally a campaign that I'm on, to get it broken down for women, so that they can have hormone replacement. That's the key, not just I guess hormone therapy, hormone replacement, replacing what is actually dropping off and when. So we sort of touched on the synthetics and the non-synthetics, and I think it's probably useful to talk about that, isn't it?
Definitely.
So we've actually got 4 types of HRT. So you've got your natural way, which would have been, your black cohosh and your dongquais and all of those things, sort of herbals. We're going to park those for a moment, because I'm finding, it might just be my clinic, but I don't know that many women who get by on those these days. Maybe it's just they don't talk about it so much. But if you're getting by on the black cohosh, I'm thrilled for you. Keep doing what you're doing. But we've got 4 types of HRT. So from the doctor, you can go down the synthetic route, or you can go down what's called the body identical route. So body identical are hormones that literally look like our own hormones if you look at them chemically, and they're made from yams. The synthetic route tends to be the route that doctors will promote, And the truth is, that makes me very angry, is that a lot of those synthetic routes are financially incentivized. The doctors' surgeries are financially incentivized to get women onto the synthetic routes, particularly the Marinacor. That is a financially incentivized drug. Now, progesterone, I mean, it's just progesterone, right? Except it's not, is it? And you know this, but if you actually look at the, if you look at the chemical composition of the synthetic progesterone, it actually looks more like testosterone, a different hormone. Now, progesterone is our calming hormone. It's what makes it a mood stabilization. Yes, it does stuff like, thickening our womb for pregnancy, but as you know, it does so much more than that. And so if we're not replacing it with a like-for-like comparison, we're actually getting a different result. And the result that comes from the synthetic progesterone is actually more of a ramp you up, get you excited, get you going hormone. And so actually women, especially if they're fatigued, end up wired and tired. Like I can't sleep. I'm absolutely like, I'm just in overwhelm. I don't know what's going on. My anxiety's gone through the roof. I'm piling on weight. So a lot of women, especially if they had these precursors, those synthetics are not helpful. They're really not helpful. And when we switch onto those body identical hormones, that's when we start to notice, okay, my sleep's improved, my skin's improved, I'm actually smiling at the world again. But the only problem with some of the body identical is that women often have an issue getting the dosage right with the progesterone because they will experience spotting. So that's like the medical approach. The two approaches there. Then we actually have bioidentical hormones, which are unregulated, but that just means that the NHS doesn't work with them. But if you work with a really good practitioner, then there's a lot of less risk associated with them than people often think. And so you can have low dose bioidentical hormones. And to give you an idea, the body identical progesterone is 100 milligrams. One drop of low dose bioidentical is 4 milligrams. So like you were saying, those women very, very early on in perimenopause, maybe 37, I've just had my last baby, I'm just feeling like I'm going a bit mad. Sometimes they just need a little bit of scaffolding. So they're not, everything's not sort of escalating and they feel horrendous. So low dose bioidenticals, some women actually get by on some herbs and the low dose bioidenticals. Lovely. They get through their whole menopause on that. Lovely. Then if for really tricky cases like me, you can actually work with specialists on Harley Street where they do the bespoke bioidentical hormones that are compounded. They do blood tests and they do like a recipe specifically for you. They're incredibly expensive, which makes them very limited in terms of access. But for women where they've got really big issues, they can be an absolute game changer.
Absolutely. And I actually recorded something the other day with one of the other experts who's a medical herbalist. And again, her thing, whilst she's not using the hormone medicines, she's using the herbs that a lot of them historically were derived from. And again, she's creating that bespoke prescription for each person.
Lovely.
And I think there's a lot to be said for not kind of, I think as a society these days, we're very much like, well, it's either pharma or it's not. It's like, well, actually, it's kind of what's right for you.
Yeah.
And
I think it's,
yeah,
it's
and
really
I think I see a lot of
people
people who go, well, I can't do HRT because, and it's like, well, okay, but for starters, that's probably not necessarily true that you can't full stop. But also, I think then you have the flip side of that people go, oh, well, you know, none of the kind of alternative things will do it because it's not pharma. And it's like, well, actually, pretty much all medicines, the idea of them came from herbs originally, and they've just made them a bit more a bit more profitable by cutting out the middleman, you know.
Exactly. And like we said, you know, the Utrogestin, the natural, the body identical progesterone you get from the GP, that's soy and yam. So, you know, it's like it comes from those natural things. But yeah, and a lot of people say, oh, well, I've just gone through it, you know, I've gone through it naturally. And I'm like, well, that's great. And then they say, well, I've been using Maca and I've been using Chaste and I've been and I kind of go, you are still using those things are powerful. They are powerful.
Yeah.
I remember someone telling me about Maca when I was getting horrendous hot sweats before I was on the HRT that I'm on. And I just went, that is not going to cut it. I mean, I'm a nutritionist and I work with supplements, but I was like, I don't, literally like I've been in a shower. I don't think so. And I was like absolutely stunned that after 3 weeks, I just went, they've completely gone from just, I mean, it tasted disgusting, but like, oh my God, that is so powerful.
Yeah.
So if you are nervous about HRT, there are options. There are really powerful options. But I think what I would like to say is we can't fool ourselves that they're not hormone replacement, because they are. They are absolutely mimicking estrogens and progesterones.
Yes, and I think that's the thing. I think, you know, the purpose of this month was of having this topic of HRT or not, was to absolutely to open up this topic of conversation, that there is this perception that it is pharma or not, and I guess that's where people sort of fall into the HRT or not camps. And it's so much more complicated than that, isn't it? It's
so much more complicated.
How are you going? Because you're going, if you've got as far as watching this on YouTube or on the website, it's because your hormones are doing all sorts of crazy stuff and you want to feel better. So in some way, you are going to have to regulate your hormones to feel better.
Yeah, there is no other way around it. Yeah. And I always talk about, you know, hormones are the foundations of the house. So we can put as much nice diet as we want on. We can do as much, you know, trying to sleep or aromatherapy oils as we want. They're nice scaffolding for the house, but the house is still going to fall down unless you've got those foundations in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else we need to cover off, or do you think we've done pretty well here?
I think we've done pretty well. I think I really do always want to impress that HRT isn't the magic bullet. We do have to do it. It will only be putting a sticking plaster on stuff that is there. So if you have got a history of really bad gut dysbiosis or, you know, chronic stress, it's only going to be able to do so much. It's not a magic wand. So there is some work to be done as well, but that is actually the gift of menopause, because it makes us assess the things that aren't serving us anymore.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you.